Okay, so today we're tackling something huge. I mean, truly one of the most ambitious projects in modern history. We're talking about crafting the Constitution of India. Let's dive right in.
So let's just think about this for a second. How on earth do you write one rulebook for a nation of hundreds of millions of people? A nation scarred by a brutal partition, just emerging from 200 years of colonial rule. You've got hundreds of languages, so many different religions, and social structures that are just deeply ingrained. This wasn't just about jotting down some laws. No, this was about building a nation from the ground up, against what seemed like impossible odds.
All right, so that's the backdrop. The year is 1947. India is finally independent, but it's also reeling from the horrific violence of partition. What the country needed, and needed urgently, was a blueprint, a single document, a constitution that could somehow stitch this vast, diverse nation together and actually deliver on that incredible promise of freedom.
And that massive task? Well, it fell to a group of people called the Constituent Assembly. You can think of them as the architects of modern India. And their journey was a long one. It actually started before independence. It all came to a head on January 26, 1950. That's the day the Constitution officially went into effect, the day India still celebrates as Republic Day.
And get this was not a rush job by any stretch of the imagination. We're talking 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. Almost 3 full years of intense deliberation. I mean, think about that dedication. The draft was picked apart, debated, discussed, and amended literally thousands of times. They were determined to get it right for India's future.
So, the big question is, how did they even begin? Did they just lock themselves in a room with a blank piece of paper? Absolutely not. The framers were incredibly smart and pragmatic about it. They basically went on a global shopping spree for ideas. They looked at constitutions from all over the world, picked out the best parts, and thought, how can we make this work for India?
But, their very first stop wasn't some far-off country. It was right at home, with something left behind by the British themselves. The main skeleton, the structural backbone of the Indian Constitution, actually comes from the Government of India Act of 1935. It's kind of ironic, right? The framers cleverly took this British-era law and repurposed its administrative framework, things like the federal structure and how powers are divided, for their new independent nation.
Okay, so what did they borrow from the United States? Some really big ones. They took the idea of fundamental rights, basic rights that are guaranteed to every single citizen. They also adopted judicial review, which gives courts the power to scrap any law that goes against the Constitution. And they even borrowed the processes for things like impeaching the president. All of these were key democratic principles inspired by the U.S.
Now, from the UK, their former colonial rulers, they took something pretty major, the whole parliamentary system of government. And this was a really smart, strategic choice. Why? Because it's the system they already knew inside and out. It made for a much smoother transition. Then they looked to Ireland and borrowed this really interesting idea called the Directive Principles of State Policy. These are basically a set of goals, a sort of to-do list for the government, outlining what a good state should strive for.
And the list just keeps going. From Canada, they got the idea of having a strong central government. From France, they took that famous revolutionary cry for liberty, equality, and fraternity, and wove it right into the fabric of the Constitution. South Africa gave them a model for how to amend the Constitution down the line, and Germany's Constitution provided a blueprint for what to do in a national emergency. It was a truly global effort, a real mashup of the world's best ideas.
So what do you get when you mix all these ideas together? Well, you get the longest written constitution in the entire world, and it's long for a reason. That length is a direct result of India's incredible diversity and complexity. The framers really tried to think of everything. So let's break down some of its most important features.
All right, so we've already touched on the parliamentary system and those crucial fundamental rights. But just as important was creating a totally independent judiciary, a court system free from political pressure. And then there's this, and this was absolutely radical for the time, universal adult franchise. From day one person, one vote. It didn't matter who you were, what your background was, or if you could read or write. Every single adult citizen got the right to vote. That was a huge deal.
Their framers were also really forward-thinking. They knew India wasn't going to stay the same forever, so they built the Constitution to be a living document, one that could bend without breaking. Some parts are locked down tight. They're really hard to change and need huge agreement. But other parts are more flexible and can be updated more easily. It's this brilliant mix of being rigid and flexible at the same time, designed to be both stable and able to adapt over time.
Okay, this leads us to a really interesting and sometimes confusing part of the Constitution, its basic structure. Is India a federal system like the United States, where states have a lot of power? Or is it a unitary system where the central government calls all the shots? Well, the truth is, it's kind of both. You can see this balancing act right here. You've got federal features for sure, like a clear division of powers between the center and the states, but then you have these strong unitary features, like a powerful central government and single citizenship for everyone. So why the unique mix? You have to remember the context. The framers were terrified of the country breaking apart, especially after the trauma of partition. They believed a strong center was absolutely essential to hold the nation together. That's why experts often call India quasi-federal. It's federal in form, but unitary in spirit.
Now, if you think of the Constitution's articles and laws as its body, then the preamble, well, that's its soul. It's the mission statement. In fact, India's Supreme Court has even called it the key to understanding what the framers were thinking. It's a short, powerful paragraph that lays out the entire philosophy of the document.
And it starts with these incredible words, "We, the people of India." Just stop and think about that. The power, the authority of this entire document doesn't come from a king or a foreign government or even a parliament. It comes directly from the people. It's a profound statement. But okay, let's break down what the rest of those big words actually mean.
First up, sovereign. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It means India is its own boss. It's totally independent, not a colony or a territory of anyone else. It makes its own laws and its own decisions, internally and externally. Full stop.
Next, we have socialist and secular. And here's a fun fact. These two weren't in the original text. They were actually added later in 1976. Socialist points to the goal of achieving social and economic justice for everyone to narrow the gap between rich and poor. And secular is super important. It means the state doesn't have an official religion. It treats all religions with equal respect and protects everyone's freedom to practice their own faith.
And finally, we have democratic republic. Democratic is what we just talked about, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And republic means the top job, the head of state, isn't passed down through a royal family. There's no king or queen. Instead, the head of state, the president, is an elected official.
So after defining what kind of nation India is, the preamble makes 4 huge promises to its citizens. First, justice. And that means social, economic, and political justice. Second, liberty, the freedom of thought, expression, and belief. Third, equality, of status and of opportunity for everyone. And finally, fraternity, promoting a sense of common brotherhood to protect the dignity of every individual and keep the nation united.
So when you step back and look at it, the Indian Constitution is just a remarkable achievement. It was born out of a really chaotic and violent time, pieced together from ideas from all over the world and driven by this incredibly powerful vision for a new nation. But of course, that leaves us with a big, lingering question. India today is changing at a dizzying speed. So is this blueprint, now over 75 years old, still the right one for the world's largest democracy as it moves into the future?